Hello and welcome to my channel. Today we are going to talk about rainfall. So how does rainfall occur? There is a lot of water which is present in the lithosphere, in the lakes, seas, rivers and oceans, as well as there's a lot of moisture in the air. The process in which moisture is picked up from the ocean and the seas and other sources of water is called as evaporation, where the source of heat energy is the solar energy. So, water gets heated up because of the process of convection, where the molecules move to the source of heat energy, which is the solar heat energy. And the water changes in its formation, it changes from liquid state to vapor state. It changes from water to water vapor. And this process is called as evaporation. So, the capacity of air to hold water vapor also depends upon the temperature. If the temperature increases, air expands. Thus, the capacity of air to hold water vapor also expands as compared to cold air. So, if the air is warm, it will attract more water vapor and hold more water vapor. And if the air is cold, then of course the air will be drier as compared to the warm air. So, the air is said to be saturated when a given mass of it contains all the water vapor that it has the capability to hold. So, that is the maximum level of air or a volume of air to hold water vapor. And the temperature at which the saturation is reached is called as the dew point. So, when the air has cooled down beyond the dew point at a certain height, because the warm air rises, when it reaches a certain height, it starts cooling down. So, when it starts cooling down, the water vapor will start condensing and thus results in cloud formation. And when the clouds also get saturated, then rainfall occurs. So, the warm air always expands, it becomes lighter in weight and it expands and it rises in the upper altitudes where it gets cooled down. The rate of cooling of air is normally 6 degrees centigrade per kilometer of ascent. So, this rise of air is a result of various factors. It can be that there is a mountain which is forming a barrier, and thus the air rises and condenses. And we will talk about it in orographic rainfall. And it can also happen that a very massive mass of cold and heavy air forces warm and humid air to rise and then to lift that air up and then to condense and thus causing the rainfall to occur. Let's talk about the different types of rainfall. So basically the first type of rainfall is called as relief or orographic rainfall, which happens in a mountain region or a hilly region. So this is a very normal and widespread type of rainfall in which there is a huge mountain which stands on the path of a moisture laden and warm wind and forces them to rise. As this warm air which is laden with moisture rises, it expands and cools down when it reaches a certain height and thus condenses and forms clouds. This type of rainfall is very heavy. So, this normally happens when there is a water body or a sea or an ocean on one side of the mountain and land surface on the other side. So, the windward side or the side where there is the sea or the ocean or the water body from where the warm air rises is called as the windward side, where most of the rainfall occurs. For example, Cherrapunji, which is in Assam, lies on the windward side of the Khasi Hills. Therefore, it receives heavy rainfall, about 1000 centimeters of rainfall. Similarly, the Konkan region on the windward side of the Western Ghats also receive around 250 centimeters of rainfall, which is very heavy rainfall. So, when this moisture laden wind, as it sheds all the moisture on the windward side, crosses the mountain and moves on the other side, which is called as the leeward side, most of the moisture is lost. So, the other side of the mountain, which is the leeward side, is also called as the rain shadow area. In this region, air becomes basically drier and only slight rainfall may occur. like the Deccan region is also called as a rain shadow region of the Western Ghats. Now let's talk about the second type of rainfall, which is convectional type of rainfall. This happens due to the conduction. The air near the surface at any point becomes warm and the air rises because it becomes warm, and this is in the form of convection currents. So what is convection? Convection is when the loose molecules move towards a source of heat energy, gets heated up and it rises. So the convective currents basically happen when the atmosphere is warm or when there is local heating. So when the air mass gets heated up, it rises. And this also evaporates moisture. When it reaches a certain height, it forms cumulonimbus clouds because the air reaches its saturation point and thus gives heavy rainfall. But this type of rainfall does not last for very long. They may occur along with thunderstorm and lightning. Such kind of convectional current is very common within the tropics and also in the equatorial belt, which happens almost every day and especially in the afternoons when the land gets heated up. Convectional current also may occur in the summer months of steppes and prairies. But in the prairies and the steppes, the amount of rainfall is much less as compared to the rainfall which happens in the tropics. The third type of rainfall is called as a cyclonic rainfall, which happens along with cyclones as well as depressions. This type of rainfall happens because when the temperature of a region is high, there is low pressure which is created, which enables the air to rise and a vacuum to be created. Whereas the regions which are cooler has got high pressure. Thus, the cold and heavier mass of air from the high pressure zone are attracted towards a vacuum which is created in the low pressure zone. Thus, there are two air masses which are involved. The warm air mass, which is less dense and it rises gradually over the cold air mass, which is very heavy. And as this warm air mass rises, it starts cooling down and also condenses, and the rainfall happens because of the saturation point which is received. So therefore, cyclonic rainfall happens when there are two air masses. One is warm air mass and the other is cold air mass. This type of rainfall is similar to convectional rainfall, but in convectional rainfall, the air or the warm air rises almost vertically as there is a mountain barrier. But in cyclonic rainfall, there is no mountain which is involved and the air masses almost move obliquely, like the warm air mass will rise above the cold and dense air mass. Sometimes very dense cumulonimbus clouds are also formed and it is accompanied with thunder and hail. But this type of rainfall is less violent as compared to the convectional rainfall. The cyclonic rainfall may last longer as compared to convectional rainfall, and cyclonic rainfall is very common in the temperate zones when there is cooler air mass which is coming from the polar high pressure belt and also the warm air mass which is coming from the subtropical high pressure belt, and when these two masses of air meets with each other there is a cyclonic condition which is created which results in rainfall.